International Fire Radio.
Of thermal imaging in the fire service. This year, 2023, is the 10th anniversary of the release of their K-Series thermal imaging cameras. Back in 2013, the K-Series was launched to specifically target firefighters in making their job more effective and efficient by using thermal imaging technology. 10 years later, they're bringing so much more to the table with a multitude of cameras that help you on a situational or tactical decision making. They make a camera for every position on the fire ground. Check out Teledyne FLIR. They bring so much to the table in the world of thermal imaging. And at FDIC this year, 2023, you can find them in booth 443 with Teledyne Gas and Flame, as well as you can find them in their partners booths, 1201 with Team, 3457 with Darley, and of course you can find them at the Whitmer Fire Store, 110 and 111. Look for Teledyne FLIR this year at FDIC 2023. Ask them to show you the product and talk about thermal imaging because it is the technology that pushes the firefighters forward. Anyway, Teledyne FLIR, a great sponsor and a part of the National Fire Radio platform. This episode's brought to you by the 2448 Podcast. If you're a first responder with an entrepreneurial streak, check out the 2448 Podcast. Hosted by Sam Massa, who built lighting company High-Vis LEDs. During his off time, he serves as a volunteer firefighter and professional EMT. Each week, we tell the stories of different first responder-owned businesses, from small startups to food trucks, to companies like National Fire Radio and Fire Department Coffee. Available anywhere you listen to podcasts. Go to the2448.com for more information. That's www.the2448.com for more information about this killer podcast. And if you're coming to FDIC this year, join us in booth 13073, right by the entrance in the main hallway where National Fire Radio, yes, us, in conjunction with the 2448 Podcast, will be teamed up for live shows throughout the duration of FDIC. It's going to be a killer week out in Indy. Join us at booth 13073 right in the main hallway where you come right into the convention center. We're going to be right there live broadcasting throughout the week. Come see us. Guys, thanks for checking it out. Check out the 2448 Podcast. And now, without further ado, the daily episode.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is episode 15 of the Size Up by National Fire Radio. Thanks for tuning in. It is just an absolute beautiful day here in good old scenic New Jersey as I'm looking out the window in my makeshift office, podcast studio, whatever you want to call this part of my house that I'm in. And I'm super stoked to finally, and when I mean finally, and once I introduce him, I'm going to see if he can remember when we actually met and have talked about collaborating on a project. That's pretty much about how long ago this has been. But without further ado, it's my online friend, because as you guys know, I meet a lot of people online and rarely get to meet them in person. And we talk about it, and someday we're going to do this. But my good friend from the not-for-profit Food on the Stove and the Washington, D.C. Fire and EMS Department, Jonathan Tate. Jonathan,
Pip,
finally.
Pip, finally, right? Thank you
Finally.
for having me. I appreciate it, sir. Thank you for this has been long overdue. So,
Right? Where are we at
appreciate
here?
you.
Like 4 years of trying to collaborate on anything?
Yeah, I was actually just starting Food on the Stove when we were talking. So I had just started, going around the firehouses and stuff like that. So yeah, it's been a minute, about 4 years.
Was it 4 years? When did you start Food on the Stove? We're going to talk way more about Food on the Stove, more about Jonathan. But when did you start it now that we're on this road?
Started it 5 years ago. So we're
Okay.
coming up on our 6th year. So
Congrats.
it's been about 6 years. So 6 years of serving those who serve us.
And it's even better, you survived that year that we just referred to as 2020. So surviving through that was huge, I'm sure.
Man, actually, to be honest with you, Pip, we grew substantially during that time because, as we serve firefighters, they were the ones working on the front line. So we had to step our game up. So it was actually a blessing for us to be in a position to be able to help those working on the front lines at the time.
I think when we think back of 2020 and the pandemic, there's so much negative you could always bring up. but there's also so much positive where I just heard someone saying last night, and I don't know what it was on that we were watching it. Oh, we were watching. So my sons are into surfing, and there's this great documentary called The 100-Foot Wave, about surfing a 100-foot wave, literally in Nazaré, Portugal, and they just released their second season of it. And they had talked about their own personal growth during the pandemic and the lockdown. And I think it's great to hear your positivity for that, because you are out there serving, those that serve. And we definitely needed it. I know I had a lot of we didn't have food on the stove meals, but we got a lot of drop-offs from a lot of different companies. Some were not as healthy as others during the pandemic.
And look, rightfully so, because at that moment, even while we were doing it, our most important thing wasn't health and wellness. That wasn't the priority. It was meeting the immediate need, which was serving firefighters. Grocery stores put limitations on the amount of food you can buy because people were hoarding food. So our goal was just to make sure that firefighters were able, and EMS personnel were able to have a full course meal while they were out there serving on the front lines. You can't feed a firehouse of 15 on 2 packs of chicken. So
it's not gonna happen. It's totally
you're gonna have some angry people.
I don't think you could feed a firehouse of 4 on 2 packs of chicken. Just to throw that one out there.
Well, that's the thing. That's what we're trying to teach them: portion control. But at that moment, during the pandemic, portion control didn't matter. We just wanted them, comfortable out there as they serve the public.
Yeah, that was
as comfortable as they could be.
And I think too, with food and the fire service, and again, we didn't even get into your story or what you're doing, but we're just talking, so that's cool. But with food and the fire service, food is comfort, right? Food makes us feel good. Not just in the fire service, in life. And that thing that you brought up, that portion control, because doing what I've always done with the fitness end, I mean, I avoid nutrition. Everyone knows that. I try not to talk about that. But I think portion control is really key in what you're eating. That first plate, it needs to be hearty. The second plate, though, we run into problems, right?
Right. Sometimes that second plate isn't even needed. I kind of liken it to when you go out to a restaurant, you don't order seconds because you know it's going to cost you something.
It's going to cost you more.
It's going to cost you more. And it's the same thing whether you're at home or in the firehouse. That meal may not cost you money per se, but it's going to cost you something, whether that's the extra added calories, hypertension, diabetes, things of that nature. So sometimes it's not so much the food that we eat. Sometimes it's just how much of it that we're eating. So that can be an issue.
I feel like we almost have to be like, listen, if you're going for a second plate, that's another $10 on top of your 10 for the kitty that you put in already.
You're might going make somebody again, think about it. Yeah, it may make you think about it.
Or I may get punched in the face. I mean, it's one or the other. But that cost, So here, let's jump back. But I love that you just said that about that second plate and the true cost of it, right? Not the monetary cost, but all the other things. So let's jump back in your life. Can you just fill everybody in on your start in the fire service? What brought you that way? Because you have a little unique story, where a lot of us are second generation firefighters, but I know your father played a humongous role in your life. So can we talk about that for a little bit here?
Indeed. So I'm a native Washingtonian. I grew up in Washington, D.C., Northeast Washington, D.C., Ward 5, in the 80s. So if anybody remembers D.C. at the time, it was a lot going on. It was recognized across the country as Chocolate City, meaning that it was probably more Black people here than any other place in the country. High population of African Americans. But also we had a drug epidemic. It was also known as the murder capital as we were coming up. Crack was very accessible all throughout our communities. And my father was present, very present in my life, not just present, but in our own household. And that was something that you didn't find too much with a lot of my friends, particularly, or even younger African-American men in DC. Families were kind of split up, whether for numerous reasons, but my father was always there, right? And he was able to provide for my brother and I. So I grew up a lot more fortunate than a lot of my friends coming up because my father was in the fire department. Now, if you think about it, there weren't many opportunities for African American men in terms of career choices at that time. My father used to always say either you're going to be a firefighter, police officer, or a postal worker. But in terms of career choice, if you weren't going to college, there weren't a lot of opportunities out there for you. So if I'm honest and just speaking transparent, my father was in our community seen as a very wealthy man because he was able to ascend to the rank of deputy fire chief in DC Fire EMS, and like I said, it offered my brother and I a lot of things growing up, whether it was tennis shoes, clothes, things that our peers may not have had. So the thought was that my father was a drug dealer because that was
You
what
were
most
fancy,
black.
right? You
Yeah,
had, right?
we had. So that was the thought. And when I would say, I remember one time I was in elementary school, and they couldn't believe that my father was a firefighter because obviously firefighters can't make that much money to buy you the things that you have on, right? So and that was one of the things that we just didn't know. Like as kids, you didn't know that the fire service provided you a great career, a lifestyle that could be sustainable for you and your family. But my father must have known something or looked into something and wanted a career in the 50s when he joined the fire service. So
So when
he
your
joined the fire. Go ahead.
dad joined then in the 50s too, I mean, African Americans were, that was the one of the first, I would imagine, not
Yeah,
the first, or it could be. I don't know. You tell me. I don't know. I don't know. I
yeah,
know
it was.
you, but I don't know
I
it
think
too
it was
well.
just integrated in the 40s or the 50s.
Okay.
So even with that, that's a whole nother story
Yeah,
in
for
terms
sure.
of him joining the job, whether he was accepted or not, and things of that nature. He went through a lot while he was in the fire service. So though he's not here, I understand a lot better now the things that he went through. And I commend him on just staying the course because him being disciplined and staying the course provided me a lifestyle and also ushered me into my calling, which I believe is food on the stove. Because I probably wouldn't have joined the fire service if my father wasn't, if I didn't have that history of him being a firefighter.
Yeah, that's a huge part of the fire service, is seeing your dad doing it and knowing, and me being a second generation, firefighter kid, when my dad would, I just knew my dad worked, right? He worked at the firehouse. He was a firefighter. He was a captain, deputy chief. He worked as a mechanic on his days off. And I knew he was gone. I knew he was working hard. I knew he provided for us, like you said, like you got those things. But they never really shared, I guess, the importance of the work and the money. At least in my household, and it sounds a little bit like in yours, it was just there and you knew that they did it. Where I feel like as a dad now, I'm trying to teach my kids the things that maybe my parents didn't teach me exactly, and explaining to them that, we risk our lives, we make a great salary, we have very good health benefits, the importance of pensions with our children. But it seems like your dad, just like mine, was able to impart that in you without really saying it, correct?
Yeah, definitely. So, and you said a lot that we could touch on right there in terms of pensions and just sharing with your kids. So, my dad didn't really bring work home, and I'm the product of a second marriage from my dad, right? So, I was still really young as my father was coming up the ranks in the fire department. So, I don't even remember my father as a firefighter, to be honest with you. My time of growing up, he was, I think at the time, maybe even a captain. I mean, he didn't really get promoted until 20 years into his career. But as I remember, he's been a captain or maybe even a battalion chief, as I remember, and then on to deputy fire chief. But um, he didn't really share much about the fire service at all. I mean, he was a big he played a big role in the community in terms of community outreach and engagement in the fire service. So every chance he would come and show his gear to the kids at schools. He would plan trips for our classmates to go to the firehouse so that we can learn fire prevention and things of that nature. But never did he share like the stories that people kind of glorify today. Oh, I fought this fire, I did that. That wasn't something that was shared in my household. In fact, If you remember the movie Backdraft, he wouldn't even let us watch that in the house. And the reality was, and I understand a little bit more now, was that I asked him, I was like, why can't we watch Backdraft, Dad? You a firefighter? And he was saying, because I lived it. And that goes back into now what we see a lot more, the mental health aspect of it. Yeah. I didn't know what he was dealing with then, but I'm sure at that time they didn't have SCBA bottles and things of that nature. There were a lot of close calls for him. And I can remember one of my father's friends telling me at a Maryland University basketball game that my father had saved his life. I was a kid. I didn't really understand it. I can remember this guy was burned on like his neck and on a part of his face. And yeah, it wasn't something that he really wanted to talk about or glorify. I think today we have a lot of protection centered around us that allows us to glorify the job. And I think there are people then who glorified the job. That just wasn't my dad's thing. Like,
it was definitely a different generation, right? Like definitely different ways to think about it. And just even, we just did a thing in my fire department for a young boy. So my dad and I went and we were driving like 3 blocks from my firehouse. And I had a fire on that block not a couple of years ago, but I'm driving with my dad. I've driven around the city with my dad. I can't even count how many times. And he's told me every story you can imagine. And he looks over at this house and he's like, oh, that's where I pulled Jimmy blah 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 out of a fire. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like we've driven by this house. Who knows how
you can understand. You can understand. Yeah. He knows you probably can process it a little better now than as a kid will process it.
Yeah, for sure. And he just never told me that story. I'm like, you've never even said that as long as I've been on the job. You've never told me you pulled a guy out of that building. Like never even told me the story in general. But it's one of those things where they were just different people. And I think, you know, the things that we've learned that they did right, and maybe the things that we learned that they did wrong, like not having SCBAs, then getting SCBAs and not wearing SCBAs, let's say, for a while, right? And now we're to the day that, like, I don't picture we're doing overhaul in SCBAs because we've learned so much more about it, and we're trying to advance it, right?
Indeed. So yeah, that's crucial. But also, I want to go back real quick because of the things that, though he didn't teach me so much about the fire service, there was things that I learned because that I know now that I picked up because of what he was learning in the fire service. For instance, I grew up in a smaller house in Washington, D.C., and we didn't have a huge kitchen. So there was never a purpose for like a broom mop, a large mop. So growing up, we had a sponge mop where you dip it in a bucket and you pull it up and it squeezes out. Yep. One of those, if you can kind of picture it, it just was a sponge at the bottom of a stick, and it had like this little system where you pull it up and it squeezes, the sponge comes together and wrings out all the water, right? All the solution. So that's what I used growing up, and I would push it forward and kind of scrub the floor as we mop. My father would make us clean the floors on Saturday mornings or whatever the case may be. It's kind of like firehouse.
Sounds familiar.
Right. But when I got to the academy, and once I got to the firehouse, I realized that I didn't know how to mop a floor with a broom mop. So I'm mopping the floor as I would be mopping it with a sponge mop, pushing it forward. And it wasn't until a captain or something walked out the room and was like, Tate, what are you doing? And I was like, well, I'm mopping the floor, sir. And he was like, you're not mopping the floor, you're going over your work. And it just made me realize just how much you can pick up from the fire service, but also if you don't grow up in it, you have no clue of what's really could be potentially going on.
Yeah, it's that matter of that teaching. You know, your dad was teaching you things that you didn't even know he was teaching you at the time. And then you get into a firehouse and it's a little different than you know. And your ability to adapt and overcome is a huge part of being a firefighter. And I think it's probably a huge part as to, that was a bad one, a huge part as to what led you to create food on the stove, right?
Indeed. Seeing, when I walked into the firehouse the first day, or even just into the department, I walked in there with a different perspective, right? I think most people walk in, and I walked in wanting to be a firefighter, wanting to be an EMT, and wanting to serve my my community, but also being privy to my father being a coordinator of the fire department parade and him being really engaged in the community in terms of the fire service, it made me look at it a bit differently. I saw how the community reacted to the fire service. I realized how kids get excited when they see fire trucks. So when I walked in there, I didn't just see, okay, I'm running these calls today. I wanted to know what made the fire service run. So I kind of looked at it as a business. I remember being at the academy, and it blew my mind when I think the chief allowed us to sit in one of the executives meetings. He did it in front of all the recruits and cadets. And I heard him say, yeah, and our budget is $160 million. And I'm like, oh, whoa, slow down. Like, and when you're a firefighter, you just know you get paid. You don't know all the money that it takes to actually run the department. So it made my wheels start to turn a little bit. Not so much about the ins and outs or where the money was going, but just what it takes to actually make a department run. And I've always kind of had some sort of business acumen, so it kind of made me look at things a little bit differently. But then when I walked into the firehouse, I realized that there was a huge void, not so much amongst the public, but just amongst us. So that's where something was birthed that day when I was sitting in the firehouse.
Yeah, that's such a big part of it too that folks don't realize. And as a young firefighter, you have so much thrown at you in the beginning that you're just there, right? You're there, you're doing what you're told. You're not even resting, let's call it. You're just waiting for that fire. But what you see is some folks tend to make their career that same way. They're not seeing the bigger picture. They're not looking at the community they're serving. They're not looking at how the departments run, and once you start to get into what actually goes on within your department, what goes in on the fire service as a whole, and then your department and the community you serve, that's what really makes it the most rewarding thing. And it sounds to me too, like your father, like my father before us, they were those people. We just do it differently now because we have these things like social media. We have these ways to reach out. We have ways to meet people around the world and learn their stories and see what's really it's all about. Because even when I first met you with food on the stove, I don't know, I think it took me a good 3 to 4 months to figure out what exactly it was you were doing and why you were doing it in a way.
Hey, look, I was still probably trying to figure it out then too. I just knew that God had called me to do something. I just was like, man, I just jumped in the water 2 feet. And it was like I was figuring out, and if I'm honest with you, Pip, I'm still figuring it out, right? There is no clear direction in serving people. You find out, and Food on the Stove right now is in Washington, D.C., but we plan to be a national organization. But it may look way different in New Jersey than it does in D.C. or in New York than it does in D.C. because the way you serve people, you serve them based off of what their needs are, not what you want to give them, right? And for us, that's important that we meet people where they are. Now we're not forcing our ideologies or what we think on people. Like while the fire service is a huge fraternity, if you want to call it, culture, if you want to call it, there are cultures within cultures, right? And just because I'm a firefighter in DC doesn't make me a firefighter in New Jersey, right? And I have to learn the people there, the culture is different. It may be some similarities there, but that doesn't make me just automatically know what you need. I want to hear from the people. So I'm going to always be learning about that. Things will always be, the vision will stay the same, but the mission may kind of change a little bit different as we grow.
And it makes so much sense too, having watched your growth and spoken to you, several times over the years and what you've been changing and what you've been doing. Because I remember in the beginnings too, and I think we're going to probably get into this, but how it was to pay it forward. Like everybody threw in for the kitty and that went to the next firehouse. But then you found that everybody was picking firehouses in their battalion. So you had to make that rule. That you had to go to a different battalion and pick someone on a different shift day type thing.
Yeah, well, actually how that went was, it's funny. We made them pick the firehouses that weren't in their battalion or on their shift. So that whole pay it forward thing wasn't even a plan, right? It just happened. It happened because I took some food to a firehouse and they wanted to donate the food on the stove. And I was like, well, I'm not even set up for donations. And they was like, well, here, take this money. It was actually my firehouse, Engine 11, Truck 6. Well, I recently just got transferred, but my former firehouse, Engine 11, Truck 6, they wanted to give me money. They was like, this is cool, what you doing here? And they gave me some money. I was like, well, I don't really know what to do with this because I had started it by, taking my overtime money and just trying to feed firefighters. So they gave me some money. I said, well, look, if you're going to give me some money, you choose the next firehouse that we're going to. It just can't be on your shift or in your battalion.
Awesome.
So that's where the whole pay it forward thing came from. And it actually allowed them to be able to bless other firefighters that they normally don't work with. And then it just created this whole culture of giving. They would be sending it. Firehouses from Northwest will send it across the river to Southeast. Southeast will send it back uptown. Uptown will send it to Northeast. And then it just created this great thing that we saw this, brother and sisterhood really being done in action and in deed. And it was great until the pandemic hit. And then now,
then you had to regrowth.
Now we got to figure out what to do next because we can't bring our chefs into the firehouse. We can't bring our nutritionists into the firehouse. So what do we do now? But where there's a will, there's a way, and we made it work.
Man, like you said. So with Food on the Stove too, for the folks who aren't listening, Food on the Stove is a great name for any type of fire service organization. Obviously, one that deals with food. But for the folks that don't know that are listening, Food on the Stove is a very common call that firefighters around the world go to where someone leaves a pot on their stove with their burner on, whether it be high or low. It usually starts to off gas, create some smoke. It's one of the most acrid smells that you will ever get in your turnout gear, depending on what they've left on the stove or in the oven. It can happen to anyone because maybe I've been at a firehouse that we've come back from a call and we're like, what's that smell? We didn't just go to a Food on the Stove call because we left our stove on in the firehouse and had to deal with that. But it's a really great name, Food on the Stove. So just give us that kind of beginning. What inspired the idea to do this? Because it's a great story and how you kind of started off.
Great. I'm just realizing as I kind of go around the country and share what Food on the Stove does that some people call it unattended cooking. So
that's like the official name. Like if you're like, you're the guy with the clipboard outside with the, checkbox firefighter, it's unattended cooking, but it's Food on the Stove.
Right. On the radio. But they know what Food on the Stove is. So what Food on the Stove is for us, it's a 501c3 nonprofit organization that provides tools and resources to help firefighters live a healthier lifestyle through enhanced nutrition and exercise. And the reason that's so important is because 44% of all firefighters who die in the line of duty as of 2018 died from a heart attack. There are studies that show that the life expectancy of firefighters are 10 years less than every other employee in America. Not only that, we're the only occupation that cooks all 3 meals at work. Cooks all 3 meals, not necessarily brings, but we cook all our meals within the firehouse. So while there's a lot of great meals prepared in the firehouse, the meals aren't always good for us. So what we seek to do is help firefighters be more proactive about their health by 1, educating them, and then 2, simply putting healthier meals on firehouse tables. And as I shared with you earlier, Pip, the reason I'm so passionate about it because I'm a second-generation firefighter. My dad worked for DC Fire and EMS from 1956 to 1989, retired at the rank of Deputy Fire Chief. Unfortunately, he died 9 years after he retired. So when I became a firefighter 10 years ago and I saw how we were eating in the firehouse, I said to myself, this is probably why my father was so sick. And I wanted to do something to change that. So I started Food on the Stove, which is a double entendre. It's the number one way that structure fires start due to food being left on the stove unattended.
Oh, I did not know that. I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah, number one way to structure fires start. So when I would ride the side of Truck 6 and we would be responding to the calls and we would be going on the box alarm, we'll arrive and I would hear my captain say over the radio, or another captain who was first due, or another officer who was first due would say, oh, it's just food on the stove. They would say kind of nonchalantly over the radio. One day it just clicked to me and I said, you know what, I'm going to take that phrase that I keep hearing day after day after day and I'm going to use it to help firefighters pay more attention to the food that's on their stove that I believe is ultimately killing us. So I went to my wife one day. I was like, look, I said, baby, God gave me this vision to help firefighters. And she was like, what you going to do? And I was like, man, I don't really know. I just know I'm supposed to give them food. And she was like, I was like, do you mind if I take some of my overtime money? At the time, I was working a lot of overtime. And I was like, you mind if I take some of the overtime money and go to a firehouse to take them some food? And she said, sure. So I went to the farmer's market and I bought 6 grass-fed steaks, 6 stalks of broccolini, 6 sweet potatoes, and I delivered it to a firehouse not far from where I grew up from. It's actually one of the firehouses that my father coordinated for my class when I was in elementary school to go to when we were young. So I wanted to take them to food. So for those who don't know the fire service, this wasn't my firehouse, right? So it's kind of weird for a rookie, still kind of young on the job, to be taking food to another firehouse. They didn't know whether I was trying to be nice or if I was trying to poison them. It was kind of weird.
It would be a little like, is this a prank? What are we doing here?
Yeah. Like, what the truck 6 send this over here? Like, but unfortunately, I knew some people in that firehouse, and I told them that I was going to bring some food over there.
This episode's brought to you by Fast Rescue Solutions. Fast Rescue Solutions was created with the mission to develop products and training that surpass currently accepted industry standards and that meet the operational challenges of the real world. Their mission is, always has been, and it always will be to revolutionize rescue and save lives. Fulfilling both the mission and the vision, the Fastboard is a disruptive technology in rescue, invented by 28-year Philadelphia firefighter Eric Allen, who has over 20 years in the Philadelphia Fire Department Special Operations Unit. Nationally, the average time for rescuing a downed firefighter is 15 to 20 minutes using 5 or more members. The Fastboard has the ability to reduce that time to 5 minutes or less, using only 2 to 3 members, which is 500 times faster than the national average. Originally designed to get a firefighter down and out of a basement, the Fastboard has been proven effective in nearly every rescue situation. RIT, confined space, trench and ice water rescue, hazmat, mass casualty, and the list goes on and on. Its simplicity and versatility make it a game changer. I've been calling it a game changer for the last 5 years, and it truly is changing the way firefighter removal and rescue and civilian rescue is being done. Come find them at FDIC. They'll be at booth 13120 in the Capitol Corridor. Also this year, it's known as Firefighter Road. There's a ton of firefighter-owned businesses out in that Capitol Corridor. That's where you want to be, supporting our own. Stop in and see the crew from the Fast Rescue Solutions for live demos and meet the tribe. Their tribe, there's nothing better than that. This is tried and true brothers and sisters that are into the game, and they are making the job better. Join them Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of FDIC week from 3 to 5 in the main corridor, and you can have a cold one with them for happy hour. Come down, meet the crew, let them know who you are, and let them show you why they're changing the game. Fast Rescue Solutions, changing the game in the way we're protecting our own and the civilians we're sworn to protect.
But nobody really kind of understood what was going on. Like, this dude just going around delivering food to firehouses. This is quote unquote, I guess,
when you pitched this idea, I had already been about 5 years into 555 Fitness, giving out fitness equipment and grants, and you're telling me this, and I'm like, I don't get it. Why are you bringing people food? We go shopping by ourselves. Like, what is it? Was actually, since I understood it, but I'm like, why? What's the point of this? Like, what are you gonna do? How are you gonna make this happen? And then really got into it.
Yeah, so
right? It grew very quickly, correct?
It did. So we dropped those 5 meals off that day, and now today we're at about over 50,000 meals for the fire service, right? We've been sponsored by Giant, United Healthcare, Verizon, Host Hotels, and Amazon Web Services because we developed the app. And what I always say, Pip, is that food on the stove is based on the foundation of giving. Far be it from me if I come into your firehouse with a message and not a meal. I realize that I understand people, right? So I understand people are more willing to listen to you when they actually know that you care about them. So you can have a ton of nutritionists, the smartest nutritionists in the world, coming in firefighters or anybody else aren't stupid. They know that you're getting paid to be there, and you probably could care less whether they listen or not.
Yep.
But what I tell people is that food on the stove was started by a 15-year-old boy that missed his father. My father died when I was 15 years old, and it left a huge void, not just in me, but in our household. Because he was the breadwinner. So when I got to the fire academy, I had to grow up fast when I was 15 because my brother had gone off to college. I'm pretty much like the man of the house now. And I had prepared myself for my father's death. So 9 years out of that time, he was retired. 6 of those years, he was really sick, right? And every day he had 2 heart attacks, or maybe even three heart attacks. He was battling with lymphoma cancer. And I saw the strongest man that I knew become the weakest man that I knew. So for 6 of those 9 years, I had waited every day for him to die because I just knew it was going to happen. And it wasn't until I was 15 that, I was at school one day and the teacher came in and my head was down on the desk. And I remember the principal whispering in the teacher's ear, and he was like, "Mr. Tate, can I see you outside?" By the time I got to the door, I was like, "My father's dead." That's what I told the principal, and all he could say was, "I'm sorry." And I was like, okay. And I didn't even cry because I kind of prepared myself. It was almost to be expected. And when I say food on the stove was started by a 15-year-old boy, it wasn't until 15 years later, 30 years old, me joining the fire service, that I realized how much I missed my father. I had never cried about him dying until I got to the academy. I think one day I was struggling, and I said, I was like, man, the only person that I knew that could help me through this process or really understand me going through this process was gone. And I'm like, that was the first day I got home and I cried and I said, I miss my father. I probably said I miss my.
It's that end that you realize, and again, being a second generation kid, I've had those moments where I just called my dad, and I can see you missing that. And it's even something you don't, obviously I don't realize it because I have my dad, but that how important that family structure is to us,
Yeah.
in life in general, not just being firefighters, but you have that you need them still, even as a 30-year-old man. Here I am, a 40, soon to be 45-year-old man, still need my dad. When I have him, I'm so appreciative of that.
Right.
But I think what you were able to do is, if what you're saying to me, maybe I'm a little wrong, but you channeled him to create this, correct? You channeled all those lessons.
Indeed. So I'm not just fighting in that sense. I'm not just fighting for firefighters. I'm fighting for their 15-year-old son and daughter, and hopefully they don't make the same mistakes that I made growing up. Because when I talk to you about it, left a huge void. Because I'm always kind of transparent into how I got here. So when I talk about it leaving a huge void from a financial perspective, like the fire service is great in the sense that we're one of the few occupations that still get a pension, right? Yeah. You don't really see that in the workforce anymore. And while the pension is great, you have to look at it with a clear view, right? And the reason I say that is because everybody say, "Oh, I'm gonna work 30 years, I'm gonna retire, and I'm gonna give them 80% of my pay, and I'm gonna ride off into the sunset." But your pension depends on you staying alive, right? If you pass away, and this is what happened in our case, when you pass away, your pension gets cut in half for your spouse. Most people don't even think that far down the line because they just think they're going to be alive. But we work a job that's literally day in, day out designed to kill you, right? Whether it's or just beat your body up. It's not made for you to have the best quality of life.
And our dads did not understand that at all. The fire service of the 80s, and I think probably in the 90s is when we really started to at least realize it or see it. And then, you had the 2000s where people started talking about it, right? And then 2010s, let's say, you had us actually doing things about it, and we're still trying to do things about it to make it better. Because like you said, this job, no one tells you that. It's not in the flyer that your body is going to hurt. It hurts wearing, I don't care how big you are, how small you are, how good of shape you're in, wearing an extra 100 pounds and climbing, crawling, squatting, moving in general is really hard, and it just punishes your body. And I know for me, the fitness end of it has helped, but it still punishes me. You know, I'm sure your fitness end and your nutrition end help, but you're still hurting after a fire.
Indeed. So yeah, that's it. And we want firefighters to live long after their retirement and not be broken up after they retire, right? Because the job is designed. You control the controllable. You can't control sleep deprivation, hazardous environments, stress of the job, but you can control your diet and exercise. So we're trying to give you the best chance to win. But if I go back to the pension, and I want people to really understand this and really look into your pension, is that when it gets cut in half for your spouse, so you think if you got 80%, it gets cut in half to your spouse to 40%. Now, all pensions don't work the same way, so I want people to kind of look into it. But even half of what you made, I think any husband or wife would desire for their spouse and their family to get everything that they made, right? But that's just not how it works. It's not going to be, you're not going to have a pension if you pay out for generation to generation. Now, if you don't have a spouse, your kids don't get anything, right? So you might want to look into a 457 plan or 401k or something like that, whatever type of plans your department offers, because if you're not married and you pass away, they're not going to give your pension to your kids. So when my mom passes away, that pension cuts. It's over.
It dies with
right.
her.
It dies with her, right? So that's something to think about. But also, my mom was 18 years younger than my dad. So for every year younger, you think she's going to live longer. It's kind of like insurance. It's like, okay, she's 18 years younger. So I believe for every year younger was 1% deducted. So we went at that moment 80% to 22%.
Wow. So I know in New Jersey we don't have that rule about the year deduction younger. That's one that's not in my
right, because you'll figure that you will have to pay her out for far longer than that. And it's something I need to look into. But when you look at the money and I look at her checks, I feel like she should probably be getting a little bit more based off his cost of living increase and things of that nature. So don't quote me on that, but I believe that's how their tier work, right? So that's something to look into. But even still, if it was 40%, right? If you think about that, that's still a significant cut in your household. And my father was the breadwinner in our household. So when I think one day I asked my mom for something and I didn't understand the finances and how they worked in our firehouse. And I mean, in my house. And I asked my mom for something that just at that moment, she wasn't able to do for me. Now, mind you, growing up, my father got us everything that I needed. Like if I wanted tennis shoes, his thing was as long as you do good in school and you play your sports, I got you. You don't have to worry about that. But drugs was very prevalent in our community. And I think I asked my mom for something. She wasn't able to do it at the moment, and me not really understanding. I got greedy and I decided I was going to get my own money, and it led me to make a lot of bad decisions in my youth, even being arrested for drugs in my young adult life. Right.
You'll have that. So you'll have those bad decisions. No judgment here. Bad decisions have been made.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, when you're in the community and things like that, and it wasn't that I was a bad kid. I just needed my father at the moment. I needed that guidance. I was 15 years old. I needed some direction. I needed somebody to put their foot in my tail and say, hey, we're not going to do that. Because my father was a disciplinarian. So it was more of a thing of I was just trying to find my way. And that was the easiest route to go. So thanks be to God, I was able to kind of, reroute and get my focus back on track, but enjoying the fire service because ultimately I wanted to be a sustainable lifestyle. I wanted to be able to provide for my family. And the opportunity to join the fire service came and I joined. And I think going into that, it allowed me to utilize my gifts and talents to create a healthier fire service through food on the stove.
Which is amazing. And I have to just jump back because this is something I've wanted to do as a host, and I have not had the opportunity to say something like, boys and girls, the boys and girls out there listening, when you saw the title Food on the Stove, you did not think you were going to get a pension lesson in this episode. And you just did. And it was very good. And the takeaway for this, and it's not just for firefighters, it's for everyone, is you need to be your best advocate. And you need to look into these things like your pension benefits. Just because you have a pension doesn't mean you know everything about it. And they're not willing to tell you everything about it either, and firefighters, police officers, anyone with a pension worldwide have been fighting to learn everything about it. And that's a big thing. Those numbers that dropped for your mom, and especially with cost of living raises now, a 22% of a 1989 pension in 2023 is not a lot of money.
Right,
It
right.
comes to how much more gas costs. I mean, we just play a game. Gas cost 72 cents in 1989, and now it does not anymore. We'll just say that. So
And
those are things that
she does pretty well, which I'm sure she's grateful for my father being a chief in the fire service. So
for sure.
She's okay. I will say that. So we're grateful. We're grateful for pensions and we're grateful for the fire service. But I will say this: for everybody that's listening, the best way to maximize your pension is by investing in your own health, right? Because if my father would have known that in order to maximize he had to stay alive, he would have invested as much in his health as he did his pension or for plan. Because in order to maximize it, you have to be alive. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get you to start paying a little bit more attention to your health so that after you retire, you're in the best shape possible, you're fueling your body possible. This is not just about fueling your body while you're on the job. This is so that you can live long beyond your retirement. Because if you work for 30 years, we want you to live 30 years after.
And we had a little bit of an audio issue. I think you froze a little bit, but the audio kept coming through, so you can understand everything. But I'm just gonna reiterate what Jonathan said, just in case it's there. It's that one of the points of an organization like Food on the Stove is not just to help you today, not just to help you tomorrow, but to help you for the rest of your life. And I think when it comes to any health and wellness topic, whether it be nutrition, fitness, mental health, this isn't the quick fix. There's no quick fix out there. It's not going to fix you overnight, but it's the lifestyle that you have to live for your entire life. And I know when I had Sarah on episode 12, we talked a lot about her changes and her lifestyle changes. And it's just something that I think with the size up that we're continually making size ups of ourselves. And we have to make sure we're making these decisions for our life. And hopefully your audio is better now. So let's see. Your video.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Just got a little like cutting in and out, but it's all right. I got you.
All right, cool.
So with Food on the Stove too, here, wait, let's get back into that, because you started by bringing the meals yourself. And then that's kind of when I met you, but you were also started by bringing in local chefs and sourcing local ingredients. And let's talk about that little stage of it, and then we can kind of jump into pandemic, post-pandemic, right? Because I think that for me is like my favorite stage. Like I wanted you to come to my firehouse and get one of our local chefs and just do this, because I thought it was going to be great. And we tried to make that work, and it just didn't work.
Yeah, we started out real small, man. We kind of grew real fast. So like I said, we're still trying to figure it out. But yeah, as I said to you before, far be it from me to come into a firehouse and share a message and not the meal. I think one thing that helps Food on the Stove is that I understand the fire service from a firefighter's perspective, because I've been in the firehouse. I've spent time running the calls and things of that nature. So I knew just coming in and sharing a message wasn't going to be the thing. So in my mind, I live in a creative space. I said, you know what? I want to turn the firehouse into a restaurant, because I think that will gain their attention a little bit more. So I'm going to bring a chef in here, and he's going to prepare the meal for them, but also we're going to teach a class on how to read a food label, which I believe is the foundation of eating healthier, just paying more attention to things that you're putting into your body. So my brother, who is really the inspiration behind even my health and wellness journey, he lost over 200 pounds. And he became a health and nutrition coach. So I would have him come in and teach the firefighters. I would share my vision of Food on the Stove. He would come in and share the course of how to read the food label with the firefighters. And as he was teaching, the chef would prepare the meal for him. And at the conclusion of it, we would feed him this under 700 calorie meal, sometimes a little bit more, depending on what we were doing. But we would have everything from salmon to these fancy plates of sometimes even 3-course meals, like a shrimp salad to start, and then a roasted chicken with carrots and other things. So it was a great time, and we were able to run through a few firehouses like that until the pandemic hit. And I think firefighters really enjoyed, as much as they love to cook on their own and it builds camaraderie amongst the firehouse, it was that one day where somebody was serving them. And I think it felt good to them, because at the end of the day, I don't care what you do. You can say all day, "This is my job. I want." It feels good when somebody's serving you. And at that moment, we were able to tap into the humanity of who they were as firefighters, not as firefighters, but as people. Like, you have your uniform on, but we're not seeing you as firefighters. We're seeing you as people right now. So whether
That's
you're a captain or chief.
Such a great thing that you just said there, because again, it harkens into that message. We are just people, right? We're firefighters by choice, but we are really people. Our bodies are the same as everybody else's bodies, and I think it's going to be, again, another thing with the Size Up, with the guests that I have, that we're going to keep talking about this, and we need to take care of that. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it was such an important thing you said there, that we're just people. We need to eat. We need the fuel. But we don't need 1,400 calories at dinner. We need 700 calories at dinner, because we have 700 calories at lunch, and probably 1,000 calories. A firehouse breakfast is no less than 1,000 calories, even if you look at the labels and do it right. If you're having a good firehouse breakfast.
And that's where portion control comes in. So when I first got into the firehouse, it was, I'm not gonna say I don't eat pork. I just don't cook it in the house as much. I love ribs. If somebody's cooking them at a cookout, I'm definitely getting some. If I'm at a barbecue spot, I'm definitely getting some ribs. I love brisket. I love all the food, right? But when I first got into the firehouse, and I'm sure they'll probably cook this up in New Jersey as well, sausage gravy. That's a firehouse staple almost. It's I don't know if y'all make it up there. It's like sausage.
We're too north for that. I know what it is. We're too north for that, though. I'm just gonna
too north. See, that's where cultures change. So where I was coming in the firehouse, it was these sausage gravy with biscuits. And don't get me wrong, it tastes good, but it's extremely heavy, right? And then when you're doing cleanup and you're scooping all of it out, it's just a bunch of oil sitting at the bottom of the pot. And I was just like, man, this isn't good. And I already had some type of thought. I was already eating healthy. So then for lunch, we would be doing hot dogs and hamburgers. I'm like, hot dogs or cold cuts. And I'm like, okay, all right, we're doing this. And then dinner was pork chops. And I'm like, dang, I'm getting porked out in here. I don't eat this much pork. But when you think about it, the misconception is that firehouse meals are funded by tax dollars by some of the general public. Right. And when you're buying your food yourself for 15 people, you're trying to make it affordable as possible so that everybody can eat. What's the cheapest thing in the grocery store?
Pork
and processed foods. So, every now and then we'll get a little fancy. We'll get steaks, we'll get chicken. I think now it's a lot better. We've gotten raises and the meal fund has increased. But when I first joined, the meal fund was $10 and it's 13 people at my firehouse. How do you feed 13 people on $130? That my wife and I can go out to dinner tonight and spend $130 just at dinner alone, with appetizers, 2 meals alone, and maybe a drink or two. So
$150 for 2 is not. My wife and I can do that.
yeah. So that's commonplace. So you can see how we're trying to stretch it as much as possible at that time. So what I noticed is that we have to get firefighters to start seeing food differently. And the way I saw that was by humanizing it, bringing the chef into them, but also while we're serving them, I knew they would be willing to listen a little more, because they're going to get a free meal out of this, a free chef prepared meal. But also share with them on Crayon Level what it means to eat healthy. And we don't go into a firehouse saying, hey, don't eat this, don't eat that. It's more about what can we add to your plate that's healthier not so much removing something from your plate. And as you start feeling different, we believe that things will be removed. And the more that you know, things will begin to be removed. So we're not coming in from a scientific perspective, but just a very grassroots level, crayon level to say, hey, this is how you're going to feel if you eat this. This is how you're going to feel if you don't eat this. And this is what this helps your body. This can potentially hurt your body.
That is a total fire department t-shirt, by the way. I'm just going to throw that out there because we talked about apparel, you and I, in our conversations in the past, but like crayon level for firefighters, that's where it's at. Like you come in at crayon level. I love it. I've never heard anyone describe that it is that. I've heard a lot of things, but I'm going to steal it. I may put it on a t-shirt and we'll make a donation to Food on the Stove. I promise. Here, I said it on the Size Up right now. If we make this t-shirt, crayon level for firefighters, but it's a good, it's a really good concept because again, too, I don't want to be a nutritionist. I don't want to know every little fact. I just need to know the basics. And it's easy when it comes to nutrition to make poor decisions, you know, whether that be portion control. It's like when they say with portion control, you know, use your fist. That is the easiest portion control thing. Like if you are eating, listen, if I'm out and I get a steak and it comes out the size of my fist, we're going to have a problem, right? Right? That's for sure, especially on the price. I shouldn't say that, depending on the cut of meat. But when you're looking at the firehouse and you're making your plate, you know, you want to make sure you have those fist-sized portions because it's so easy to just keep scooping that sausage gravy and biscuits onto your plate or your bowl. And the next thing you know, you're at an 1,800 calorie meal without even, you don't need to know the facts of it all. I can just tell you, if it's more than your fist, it's way more calories than you need to be eating at that meal.
Indeed. Like, funny thing, I never paid attention to calories. And even now, we don't so much tell people pay attention to calories. We tell people your body can burn calories, it can't burn chemicals. So we want to know the quality of the food that you're eating, right? If it's on the back of the label and you can't pronounce the name on that, you might not want to use it. Like you wouldn't just put anything in your body. Well, maybe you would, but if you break down those ingredients, hydro, something, chloride, this, and that, you should ask why that's in my chicken nuggets, right? If you were to make chicken nuggets, you would just probably use chicken, seasoning, and breading. But if you buy chicken nuggets or go to a fast food spot and it has 60 ingredients, you should ask why. Your body can recognize chicken and it can recognize breading and these natural things, but it can't recognize the chemicals. So we don't know over the long haul what that could potentially do to your body. So we want you to pay attention to calories. It's funny because when one of my favorite restaurants growing up, I won't say the name because we never bash restaurants, right? I think everything is okay in moderation.
Yes.
But you'll know what restaurant I'm talking about based off this appetizer. I used to eat this blooming onion when I was young. I used to love the blooming onion, right? And it wasn't until probably a few years ago when they started putting calories on the food, on the menu, that I realized that was about 2,800 calories alone. And I could eat a whole blooming onion to myself. And that was the appetizer. But I was a kid, I can burn it off really fast. But if you're if you're an adult and you're doing that, we might want you to scale back a little bit. Share that blooming onion with the family and don't eat the whole thing yourself.
You said that.
That's a whole day's worth of calories right there.
That's a whole day and some more for some people too as well. But I didn't know it was that much, but I don't think I've ever taken down a blooming onion by myself, even in my best days. I don't think I could have done that. But and it goes into the cooking process, and there's just so many things. And I think it's great that you're out there, again, not bashing restaurants, not telling people to count calories, just trying to educate at that crayon level of how you can maximize your life, right? By eating healthy. And you've done a great job of it with Food on the Stove. I've watched you grow. Your social media has some great info that you can always find. But I want to talk about too, before we run out of time here, because I know your time is limited today, what you have coming up, because there's this thing, and I don't know who invented it, and maybe you do, but somehow May the 4th, which is really Star Wars Day. If you're a geek, it's May the 4th be with you day. and it kills my social media because I don't know which way to go on this day, right? I'm this fire service social media guy, but it's really Star Wars Day. They made it into International Firefighters Day. But what you were doing in DC is you turned it into International Firefighters Weekend. So May 4th to the 7th, right? 2023 is the year we're in. So this is coming out right before, but I know you're planning this to be an annual event. But just talk a little bit about what you got going on in 2 weeks here.
Oh man, cool, man. So I'm excited. So I can't remember the exact year. It's in my press release, but a while ago, a young lady in Australia started International Firefighters Day on May 4th. And every year we celebrate it. I think some people celebrate it, but within the fire service, but it kind of goes on as just a regular day, something that we can put on social media and people say, hey, happy International Firefighters Day. But I'm really about putting actions to those words, right? And I think firefighters deserve more than just a day. So I decided that we're going to make it a whole weekend and a weekend of events. So we'll have a series of events going on in DC from May 4th through the 7th. And our goal is to make this an annual conference. One of the things that I realized since I've been privileged and fortunate enough to kind of travel and travel around the country and share food on the stove is that when I get into these rooms, that our jurisdiction in terms of DC and this region isn't highly represented. Most of the conferences that I go to, unless it's probably like an FDIC or something like that, the bigger conferences, but like the smaller conferences, there's a lot of good information shared, and there's not a lot of people from this region going. So when I go to Florida, it's mostly Florida departments, right? And I feel like also I'm from the younger generation of firefighters that are there. And my goal is to bridge the gap between those who have been in the fire service for a lengthy amount of time. How do we get that younger generation engaged in some of this great information that's being shared on these weekends? Because typically we don't go to these conferences and things, right? One of the other things that I noticed too is that a lot of times I will be one of the few Black people in the room. And it made me realize that only 6% of the fire service is African American. And my goal is to how do I share this space with other people, because it's great information being shared. How do I get some of the people who look like myself into this room, Black, white, Hispanic, whoever? How do I share this information that's being shared so that you can get into the room and get some of what they have, but also get you a seat at the table? If not a seat at the table, my belief is that if you don't have a seat at the table, you can build your own. And this is me building my own table, inviting everybody to say, hey, we can build something like this here in Washington and DC, and everybody can take a part of it. So on Thursday, we have a seminar with some great speakers. We have Chief Mark Bayshaw, Chief Tony Kelleher, Chief Tony Carroll. Chief Bayshaw he's the retired chief from Prince George's County Fire and EMS. Chief Tony Kelleher is the deputy fire chief of the training academy in DC Fire and EMS, doing an amazing job with the training academy here in DC. Chief Tony Carroll is a retired battalion chief from DC. He is now the deputy in Louisa County. We have Megan Lotz from Fairfax, who does nutrition. We have Patrice Webb speaking on mental health awareness. And we also have Sheena Sadam talking about first-time home buying for firefighters. So just a wealth of resources, everything kind of catered towards firefighters. And that is on International Firefighters Day. And at the conclusion of that, we have a happy hour going on. Friday, we're doing, and I think you'll like this, Pip, is that we're having a midnight run. It's called a Midnight 5K.
I like to sleep at midnight. I don't like to run at midnight. I like to sleep at midnight, buddy.
But see, that's the thing, right? So the name of the run is called One Run After Midnight. And as you know, we call our dispatch calls runs. At least here in DC, we do. So to stand in solidarity with firefighters around the country, we're having a community take a midnight run. Right? They're going to see what it feels like to be up at midnight, to get a call and take a run. So they're going to do a midnight 5K. Some firefighters are going to join us. So we're getting a great response on that. So we're excited about that.
I want to bang my head against the wall. Why didn't I think of this? Like You're a genius, man. Go ahead, keep going. Genius.
But so every year we hope this grows and grows and grows. And while we can't change the call volume, we can educate people on how to utilize 911 or just other resources that are available to them that will make you not have to use 911, so that firefighters won't have to get up during the night, or EMS personnel won't have to get up during the night and possibly can get some sleep for that day. But also, like I said, we're a giving organization. So to be able to connect with pillow sponsors or bedding companies and things like that, so that we can get firefighters and EMS personnel better pillows, better sheets, better things. So we want to give. That's the end. That's what we want to do with that. And then Saturday is our Food on the Stove annual fundraiser, Dress Blue. As you know, we call our Class A's uniforms Dress Blues sometimes, or full dress uniforms. So the theme of this event is not for you to wear dress blue. It's just an all blue cocktail style event. So blue suit, blue tie, blue dress. We're inviting the community to come hear stories about centered around the fire service. We have a panel of women sharing their experience in the fire service. So we have everybody from an assistant fire chief here in DC to a probationary firefighter to share their experience. I'm sharing about food on the stove, and then a friend of mine, two friends of mine, Joe Morgan, who was burned on the Cherry Road fire here in DC in '99. He's sharing his story. He was burned on 65% of his body and given a 5% chance to live. He's sharing his story alongside Lisa Phillips, who is the wife of Anthony Phillips, who died in that fire. And what we want to do out of that conversation is humanize the fire service, to let people know that when things like this happen to firefighters, it's not just them that go through it, it's their families and their spouse and their families as well. So we want to talk about Joe's healing process from a physical standpoint, but also Lisa's healing process from a mental and emotional standpoint. And this isn't a sad story that we're telling. This is a story of resilience, how they've been able to move forward after this incident, and what they're doing to impact the fire service on a greater scale. So we're excited about that. We're going to have food, open bar, live entertainment. It's just going to be an amazing night for some inspiration and entertainment. And we hope to do this every year. And it's sponsored by our great friends at Amazon.
That's amazing. I mean, that's 3 days. So you said a lot there, and I was trying to write things down as fast as I could, right? Oh, got another
Sunday
thing.
is Firefighter Appreciation Brunch. Forgot about that at Farmers and Distillers. So we close the night with a brunch, close the weekend with a brunch at Farmers and Distillers.
Will there be sausage gravy?
No, won't be any sausage gravy. But they have some great food. They have some great food. So they give, for every reservation that is made, they give food on the stove $10. So they have been a gracious partner of us, a great partner for us, and they have been gracious enough to make that donation to us so that we can continue to put healthy meals on firehouse tables.
It's so awesome because you put so much together for a weekend, right? Where we see a lot of fire conferences out there, they do a day, they may do 2 days. They usually have a night social event. And I love that you put all these things together. And I can't wish you nothing but luck and success with this. And now I'm like, man, am I going to drive to DC for a midnight run, to take a midnight run? I think I'm off. I got to look but just all that, it's just such a good thing. And I know some of the speakers that you have, I read the bios and I read what they're talking about on the first day. And I think that's key too, that you're able to put all those things together. Down in Florida, they have some pretty well-known health and safety conferences. They also have great well-known fire conferences. It's a matter of trying to mix them. And it's great that you're doing it with International Firefighters Weekend, which you just totally hijacked from the poor girl in Australia. You should send out to her that you've changed her day to a weekend. And then we're going to see how this one works for sure. But it's all those things. And even the midnight run, literally, I'm banging my head on the wall. Why didn't I think of this?
I think it's going to be good, man. It's something that, like I said, I live in a creative space and try to see. I want to bridge the gap between the community, the firefighters, and the community that they serve, and give the community a better understanding of just while you see them in uniform, these are people, right? And they need your help just as much as you need theirs. And I want to connect the dots for that. And I think with this weekend, we have a series of events that allows them to connect with the firefighters who serve the community every day. So next year, we hope to do workshops every day and do these different events at night. And we hope to have people fly in town. We'll have everything at one central location. And also on May 6th is the anniversary of Lieutenant Kevin McCrae, who was the 100th member to die in the line of duty. I want to say it's his 8-year anniversary. So that day, we're actually doing the inaugural Lieutenant Kevin McCrae Leadership Award, which will be going to presented to his son, who is a wagon driver at the same firehouse his father last served in. So every year we'll be giving this award away, and we'll have people nominate different people, and it's a way that we can kind of keep his legacy and name alive on that May 6th date. So it's a lot happening in that weekend. So we're excited.
Keep up with you. I can't keep up with you. There's just no.
I don't think I can keep up with myself. I just get ideas and I just go with it. Like I said, I'm figuring it out as I go. So I don't know how none of this is going to turn out. We have gotten a good response, but I hope it turns out well. All things will turn out well. But I'm learning as I go. I've never done a weekend conference before, but we're going to figure out how we're going to make it work.
That's what we do as firefighters, though, right? We make it work, and that's such a big part of it. You know, you go to this unknown, right? You go into an unknown emergency, and you make it work. And seeing you put that hustle behind food on the stove, it makes me almost jealous in a way that you know, I got to work harder. I got to keep up with Jonathan Tate here and make these things happen.
Look, collaboration over competition. I think we're better together.
Yes, sir.
Right? We are better together. So this isn't a food on the stove thing. This is a fire service thing. So that's why I'm grateful for people like you allowing me on this platform where we can connect and other people can hear. But this isn't about food on the stove getting the shine. This is about how can we connect all our resources to better help our brothers and sisters in the fire service. So I'm all about 555 fitness. I'm all about Pip. I'm all about whoever's about firefighters, right? We're not going to talk around the people that we're trying to serve. We really out here trying to help them. So, yeah, I want to connect with everybody in the fire service so we can make it a better place for the next generation of firefighters. My son keep talking about he gonna put out a fire, and I'm not sure if I'm with that yet or not. So
well, he's only 4. He's got some time. He's only 4.
Yeah, he's only 4, but if that is something that he decides to do, we want to make it a better place. I want to make it a better place for him. I want to make sure that he's getting the best meals possible too.
Nice. Well, listen, you that collaboration over competition is going to be the name of this episode, and that's a mic drop moment to finish this off. But before we end here, where can the folks find you and Food on the Stove?
You can find us foodonthestove.org. That's foodonthestove.org. You can find us on Instagram, Food on the Stove DC, Facebook, Food on the Stove, Twitter, Food on the Stove _.
This man has done that before. He said those. He rattled them out like the true professional he is. Jonathan, I cannot thank you enough and wish you the most luck coming up with the whole conference. I know it's going to turn out great. I cannot wait to be able to be a part of it. Maybe this year. I'm not making any promises here, but I'm going to try to.
We're definitely going to have you as a speaker next year. So go ahead and get your stuff ready because we'll figure out the booking arrangements and everything like that. We want to have you down.
I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that. So thank you for the time. Thank you to everyone listening in today to the Size Up by National Fire Radio. As always, thank you to our sponsors. I'm Pip, and we will see you next time. Yo, that was straight epic. Even when your audio messed up a little bit, I could still hear you, and I didn't want to stop you because you were on a roll. I'm hoping Sebi can fix that. That's my audio guy. But dude, you dropped some knowledge bombs, man. I got notes to cut this up and promote and ideas. And
man, that's what's up.
I'm right there with the cooperation thing and working together. You know, like we said, we tried to do stuff. It just hasn't happened. You know, 555 is honestly, I don't think it's going to go. We're not going to go the same way we've gone. Right. Because I'm tired of giving fitness equipment to people that just want fitness equipment. And I don't know how to make those, like you were able to make those changes because you were there, right? You saw what was happening. But when we're just giving this stuff to random folks,
you don't know what they're doing with it.
Dude, and the unappreciativeness has just gotten worse is an easy way to put it. Someone literally got their $3,000 worth of fitness equipment and emailed us, "Where's the rest?"
What?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. How about that?
That's crazy.
We didn't buy fitness equipment because you told us we won and we thought we were getting everything we asked for. And in everything that we've done, it's been very honest what we give away and how we do it. Yeah, no.
Right.
There's the rest.
That's crazy.
More was coming. So
that sense of entitlement is crazy.
Fucking killer. And the cops, going to the cops, never help cops. Just stay with fire and EMS, because the cops are the fucking worst. I'm gonna stop recording this on Zoom now, just because I didn't do that. Let me listen.
National Fire Radio.